We're going to be in 1 Chronicles 14. 1 Chronicles 14. And I want to read a passage about King David. And right after he was anointed king, he faced two trials, two challenges that really set the course of his reign. And I don't think he realized that. I don't think most people realize this. But I think the way he responded tells us a lot about who he was and the faith that he had in God. So I want to pick that up and see what we can learn from it. So we're in 1 Chronicles chapter 14. We're going to read in verse 8. And I want to read the whole passage, 9 verses, and then we'll break it down. So it says, when the Philistines heard that David had been anointed king over Israel, all the Philistines went up in search of David, and David heard of it and went out against them. Now, if you don't know, the Philistines are not God's people. They're enemies of God. And there's been years and years of back and forth battling between the Philistines and Israel. It picks up verse 9. Now the Philistines had come and made a raid in the valley of Rephaim. However you want to pronounce that. David inquired of God, saying, shall I go up against the Philistines? And will you give them into my hand? Then the Lord said to him, go up, for I will give them into your hand. So they came to Baal Perazim, and David defeated them there. And David said, God has broken through my enemies by my hand like the breakthrough of waters. Therefore, they named that place Baal or Baal Perazim. You can pronounce both. I'm going to say Baal there. And that word there means like the master of breakthrough. That's what he's naming that place. He goes on, they abandoned their gods there, so David gave the order and they were burned with fire. The Philistines made yet another raid in the valley, and David inquired again of God, and God said to him, you shall not go up after them. Circle around behind them and come at them in front of the balsam trees. Some of your translations might say the mulberry trees. It shall be when you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees, then you shall go out to battle, for God will have gone out before you to strike the army of the Philistines. David did just as God had commanded him, and they struck down the army of the Philistines from Gibeon as far as Gezer. Then the fame of David went out into all the lands, and the Lord brought the fear of him on all the nations. All right, you guys with me? So David, he finally, if you don't know the story of David, like most people understand David and Goliath, that's 1 Samuel 17. He slays the giant. That comes right after Samuel anointed him as king. The big problem with that is, of course, there was a king during that time, King Saul. So David's anointed as the next king, and it is many, many years until he is actually anointed and sitting in that role as king. In fact, during those years, it's not all good. He was running from his life many of those years because the previous king, King Saul, envied him and wanted him dead. So it's been years and years. Finally, he's at this place where he is king over all of Israel. Have you ever waited for something for a long, long time? Right, like a promotion or a title, or just you're looking forward to getting somewhere. And typically when we're waiting, when we're expecting, like there's this buildup in our mind. There's all this expectation. And David gets there, and what happens? As soon as he is anointed king, no honeymoon period, no time to celebrate, no time to establish his reign as king. He's attacked. The neighboring nation hears and they say, oh, we got a new king, let's take him out. And the Philistines gather up all together. And this is interesting because I see this often. I'm curious if this is your experience as well. I've seen a lot of people, they give their lives to the Lord, and the next short season is hard, right? They just, and often they're like, I just gave my life to you, Jesus. What is this about? Is this what I signed up for? But it's also true with those who have been walking with the Lord a long time. You finally achieve some promotion. You achieve some goal that you've been waiting for a long time. And then you're pretty quickly hit with a challenge or a trial. Is that what you've experienced? Have you noticed things like that? I'm seeing a decent amount of head nods. We got Dustin in the back. Cameraman says yes. And it's interesting. I think there's a few things going on. One, I think we build these things up as we're waiting. There's this excitement, this expectation. But then you get there, and Mark Hoffman talks about often how there's a test leads to promotion, but then the promotion is a test also, which could lead to further promotion, and there's this like nonstop cycle. And I think that's what we recognize also is we finally get this promotion, but with that promotion comes more responsibility, comes more expectation, and so the tests come quickly. But then add to that this. What better time to knock you down for the enemy, for Satan to come against you, than a time you have this expectation, you have this hope, you have this excitement, you get into this new role, you're just starting to get used to it, and here he comes, like, time to mess things up. And I think the first part of whenever we enter into a new season, that first period, that first event, that first trial, is going to decide a lot of what that season looks like. How we respond, I think more often than we recognize, sets a precedent for what the Lord's going to do in us and through that in that season we're in. Let me give you some examples. I could tell you of more than one marriage. I'm thinking of two specifically. These ones went south. These ones didn't make it. Where they get married, and the very first day something happens. There's a trial, and it doesn't go well. And you think about marriage as one of those things that you're like waiting for. There's all this expectation, all this hope. And one of the situations that like on the day of, this person made just a quiet vow to themselves. Man, I'm just not going to be happy in this thing. And that little thing just set the stage for the next, I think they were together a year. I don't know. It wasn't long. I have another example that's even worse, and they separated either the second day or that night, depending on the timing. And it's like you just get into something, just show up, and your response is so pivotal in those times. But just like those people fumbled it, you can establish yourself. You can solidify. In fact, you can reinforce that you're in a position that you should be in if you respond properly and set things right. And that's what David does, thankfully. It says there in verse 10, David hears about the Philistines, they're attacking, and it says, David inquired of God, saying, shall I go up against the Philistines? Will you give them into my hand? Then the Lord said to him, go up, for I will give them into your hand. Now, this is something that I think it would be so easy for us to read Scripture and you just keep reading. You just keep going. But I want to paint a picture. How easy is it for us not to do that? You're king. You get into a position, and all of a sudden they're attacking. Like, what is your option? Are you going to surrender? Are you going to, run the other way? There's not... The clear, simple answer is to go fight them, especially if you're David. You guys know his story. If you know his story, if you know his past, what is he known for being? A warrior. I mean, they used to sing years and years ago, Saul's killed thousands, David's killed tens of thousands. This is his sweet spot, going out in battle. And so he's king. He's a warrior king. First thing that happens is the Philistines are attacking him. He doesn't like them. They don't honor God. It's pretty simple. It's pretty easy for us to assume it's go time. It's fight time. Let's take care of them. Finally, I get to do it as king of Israel. Are you with me? In fact, how easy is it for us when an opportunity comes up for us to just be like, yeah, sounds good. Doing it. Send it. Done. right? And maybe it's small opportunities, big opportunities. I just want to paint the picture. It's not that hard for us to not consider God, to just go by, just to continue. It reminds me of this story I read. I'm reading this book, Lead with Prayer. I haven't finished it yet, but it's real good so far. And they tell of this businessman he has a startup, and it's doing really well, and he gets a call from one of the Fortune 100 businesses, big business. And they say, hey, we want to work with you. This is the dream. This is the call you dream of, that you want. And this businessman, he calls his partner and he tells him what's going on. And he says, hey, I want to give God 1 hour of prayer before I answer him. So he goes to prayer. And I think about that, like 1 hour of prayer in some ways kind of feels to me like not that much. And yet, unfortunately, it might be more than I would offer God. Like there's some humbling aspects to his Bible study, some convicting aspects that I'm challenging myself with. But this guy, he goes and he prays, and he just does not feel peace. He does not feel comfortable making the deal. And his partner is irate. How dare you turn this down? This is what we've been working for all our lives. This would set us up forever. And the guy just says, no, I can't do it. There's just something wrong. And he doesn't take the deal of his lifetime. And 6 months later, that business that called him files for bankruptcy. If he would have taken the deal, his family and his business would have gone down with them. But it was just one of those things that it's everything you could picture, everything you can imagine, but even those things we have to bring before the Lord. And some of these tests, one of the aspects of this message that I want to highlight, that's not a challenge that an immature Christian would probably face or even recognize that they're facing. But many of you here, you're not immature Christians. You've been walking with the Lord for some time. And I want to tell you, the sign of a mature Christian, a mature faith, brings God into the mix for all things, big, small. In fact, one thing that I'm working on is just talking to God when I don't want to ask him anything, or I don't need anything, or I'm not seeking advice. I'm just trying to talk to God because I want to have a relationship with him, because I want to know him. I want to hear from him. David demonstrates this, and he goes and he seeks the Lord, and he gets confirmation. God says what? Send it. Do it. Go into battle. So he does. Let's read on. It says, they came up to Baal-perazim, and David defeated them there. And David said, God has broken through my enemies by my hand like the breakthrough of waters. Therefore, they named that place Baal-perazim, and they abandoned their gods there. So David gave the order, and they were burned with fire. As I said, that the name of that city there, it means master of breakthroughs. That's a pretty cool name. We live in San Diego. Yes, could have done a little bit, put a little more effort into that one. But what's cool about this is who's the master of breakthroughs? It's not David. It's not the new king, it's a king of kings. It's God. He says, God has brought victory through my hands. This is David. He's a warrior king. But he gives God the victory. And I want to tell you, there's a few levels to this. He doesn't just say, God's good. You guys know, you've been around Christians long enough where we know what we're supposed to say. We know we're supposed to give God credit. But have you ever, and probably not, probably just me, where you give God credit, kinda? Yeah, God's good. And I'm pretty good too. You give God credit in speech, but really, you feel pretty good about what you did, about how the victory that came. And there's a difference there. We as Christians, it's not enough to say the things that we know we need to say in the Christian community, but we want to be people, a mature Christian is the one that really, truly recognizes that God brings the victories. David, he's brand new king. Brand new king, you got to take your victories. You got to start making that list, making sure people have faith in you. He had every excuse to say, guys, I did it. Led you to the first victory, made the breakthrough, like all those things, and yet he didn't. But more than that is he goes and he takes all these idols, and they're worth money that people brought into battle. And that what they would do is they would bring their gods into battle because they have faith and trust in these gods. And then they ran with their tails behind their legs so quickly that they left them all scattered. But these idols are usually they're for sure worth sentimental value, but people would buy these idols and they were made of silver or gold or ornate. He could have sold them, and he burns them. And then he goes, I'm not just going to give God credit for the victory. I'm not just going to burn the idols of those who we defeated, but I'm going to name this place after God. And I'm going to name it in such a way that every time people come through here from now on, they're going to know that this is a place where God broke through, where he saved us. And this brings a couple challenges that I want to ask you. Are there victories in your life right now that you're claiming that aren't your victories? And not only that, but are there seasons of your life that you might be able to not only give God the credit for that season, but are there seasons or things that you could do to name that season or to name that time period or name that victory in a way that sets up an altar? Let me give you an example, and I want to ask a few of you maybe to give me an answer to this. But I think about my time in youth venture. And I was talking to Anai earlier. I ran Santee Youth Venture for 10 years. And my tenure there there were a lot of ups and downs. I learned an incredible amount about who I was and about my faith and if I was willing to serve God and what the reasons were behind me serving God. I spent 10 years in this position, and just full transparency, I figured when I signed up, I'd probably do 2 or 3 years and then get a promotion, move on to the next thing. So what that means is there were many years where there's room for refining, room for me to ask questions. God, what are you doing? Why am I here? All of that thing. And I think about the pastor I am today, and I think there's so much work that God did in the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th year of me working there. So I look back, and my season at Youth Venture I think of as years of preparation. Like I look back because I gave God those years. I recognized that he was working in me in a way that I needed to be worked on and was preparing me for what was next. Do you see that? That was that season. Is there a season of your life that you could quickly share with the group where you're like, this is what was going on, but this is actually what the Lord was doing? Here's what's interesting about that. You probably have experienced a time or know someone who has done something similar and responded opposite of that. I'm never posting that again. I'm never gonna speak up. And that's an easy response to instead go the other way. And that's an example of this. I want to encourage you to look for where God is in your trial. What are the victories that he's bringing about? And every trial is different. Like this trial here, he has these people that are coming and attacking him. You had people online attacking you. Dustin didn't have anyone attacking him, but he's in this place where he's has to be patient because it's exhausting working multiple jobs and trying to wait on the Lord to move past. Whatever your trial is, where is God in it, and what victories can you give him credit for? And I want to tell you, they're there. God is always moving. Right? God, and especially for those of you here who are children of God, you've surrendered your life to him. You're seeking him. You're trying to serve him. He is working to build you up for the purposes that he set aside beforehand that you may walk in. So look for him and ask him, God, where are you in this? And what can I give you praise for? A mature faith does that. It gives God the glory. But let's keep going. I'm going to go a little quicker. The story isn't over because you guys know the Philistines, they circle back. It says in verse 13, the Philistines made yet another raid in the valley. And David inquired again of God, and God said to him, you shall not go up after them. Circle around behind them and come at them in front of the balsam trees. And it shall be when you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees, then you shall go out to battle, for God will have gone out before you to strike the army of the Philistines. So can we put up that picture of the valley? I want to show you a picture of just where this is the actual valley. Now, I don't know for sure that the battle was in this part of the valley, but this is the actual valley in Israel that we're talking about in the Bible. And I want to picture it because imagine David's at the valley at the base of it, and the Philistines are coming at him, and they're coming at him again. And what just happened? He just whooped them. He just defeated the army, and they're coming again. And what I would do in this situation 9 times out of 10, at least what I'm pretty sure I would do, is like, all right, they want more? Bring it. Like, we just had victory. We just defeated them. God, we're good. I already sought counsel. You said I could whoop them. I'm going at it again. And I would just go full send. I would attack them. That would make sense to me by my human standards. And David here, he says, wait. I'm going to pause and inquire of the Lord once more. And I think this is a sign of maturity, of the greatest sign of David's maturity in this whole passage. Is as they're running at him again, he says, no, I'm going to seek the Lord still. You know, just because God moved in one way once doesn't mean he's going to continue moving in that same way. You know, just because he brought victory one time doesn't mean he wants to bring it again that in the same way or same manner or work as he previously worked. There's a quote by Spurgeon that says, do not think that the stream of providence necessarily runs in a continuous current. I was thinking about driving, and you guys know when you go on long drives, you put on cruise control and you just chill. Anyone do that? Is that an old man thing? Oh, I got a few yeses, thank you. You guys know what cruise control is though, right? All right, just checking. All right, some of you are looking at me. I'm questioning everything. But there is no cruise control in the Christian faith. It doesn't work that way. We always need to be attentive to the leading of the Lord and where he wants us to go. Even if the path in front of us looks exactly as it's looked in previous times, God still is someone that wants us to engage with him and is someone that's going to lead us. And the way he leads us isn't always the way he has led us. Now, clearly, he's not going to go against his word in Scripture. I want to, state that. But David here, he stops and he says, God, do I go again? And God tells him no. And I think about like the areas in our life. When I was an intern here at Foothills, I think I was a pretty good intern. But that doesn't mean I was supposed to be an intern for the rest of my life, right? Just because we have success in an area doesn't mean we're stuck to that area or that God doesn't want us to change and do something different. I think about some of the correction I've brought people in as I've just pastored and shepherded people. And sometimes I've been real heavy-handed with correction. I've asked multiple people at young adults to not come back, right? Because they were doing something that I was like, this has crossed a line. And there's been other people that I've given a lot of grace. In fact, grace probably beyond what I would normally give them if the Lord wasn't leading me. Why the two different directions? Well, different circumstances, but I'm constantly asking, I want to pray, God, tonight, at Tuesday night, what do you want to do? Do you want to change it up? I don't want to make assumptions about the way the Lord is going to move in my life or in my leadership. I don't want you to either. May we be a people that go before the Lord and say, God, is this what you have? Is this what you want to do? And then may we be the people that listen. David, he asked again, and God said, no. How do we become people like that? I want to go back a step. Who won the first battle? It wasn't David. Not in his eyes. It was God. You're going to go to God more and more if you see him as the one who's delivering you. If you see him as the one who's bringing the victory. But you will rely on him less and less if you see those victories as your own. If you're relying on yourself. I was thinking a kind of a silly example, but if I'm playing 2v2 volleyball, right? Just me and one other person versus another, and John Reynolds is on my team, right? If you guys haven't played volleyball with John Reynolds, you have an opportunity tonight. I want you to know if I won that game, it would not be me winning. Right? It would be John Reynolds. And I would be the one that he's like, man, God did a miracle, right? But the next time someone challenged me to volleyball, you know who I'm going to call right away? My friend John Reynolds. Because I recognize I'm not doing that by myself. But in real life, Jesus brings us victories. God moves in our life, and then we're like, well, I did pretty good there. And then the next challenge that comes, we don't go to God because we don't see him as the one who brought the victory. So you looking back on past seasons of your life, past victories, and asking God, show me how you move so I can give you credit. You right now in your life, I want to challenge you. What are the trials you're currently facing? And how is God providing strength and direction and provision? That's a good thing for us to ask. Because you are going to face another trial. And I don't want it to be by your strength that you go up and try to overcome. I want it to be by the Lord's. David follows his orders. And God said there, he's like, I want you to go around. Let me read it just so I don't get it wrong. It says, you shall circle around behind them and come at them in the front of the balsam trees. And it shall be when you hear the sound of marching in the tops of the balsam trees, then you shall go out to battle. So David circles around and he has to wait on the Lord. But he does it. He obeys. And obedience is preparation. But we don't always know what we're being prepared for. But it's because of that obedience that David heard something incredible. It says there, you shall go out to battle, for God will have gone out before you to strike the army of the Philistines. It says, wait until you hear the marching on the tops of the balsam trees. Picture this. Picture you're out in the woods. You're waiting to jump into battle. And you hear God going before you. I don't know what the marching on the tops of the balsam tree sounds like. I bet it was pretty stinking impressive. I do know what it sounds like for God to go before me. I know there's been situations in my life where I've just said plainly, Lord, I cannot do this without you. I think about a counseling appointment I had. I think it's close to a year ago now. I was counseling this couple, and they were headed for divorce. And in fact, I remember praying, God, unless you move, there is nothing I can do. And I met with the person who wanted the divorce, and they were adamant. And I said, I need a little bit more time to pray before I give you any counsel. And they were not happy with that. And so in between that session and the next one, I am praying and I'm seeking God. And this is what it sounded like for me, for God to go before me, is I show up in that counseling appointment. And before I say anything, the person goes, I've changed my mind. I'm like, I don't want a divorce. I didn't do anything. The Lord went before. I think about the times when I've financially been struggling. I was in college once. I've shared this story before, and I needed money. And I was praying, God, I am broke, and I need to pay this tuition bill that's coming in, and I got to pay other bills. And at that time, I really, really wanted to get engaged. And I'm like, ring money, hello, please God. And I show up to SDSU and I get an email that I got a $2,000 scholarship from SDSU. I was going there. I got a science and math scholarship. My major was not in science or math or anything like that. And it was like, Lord, I didn't do anything. You just went before me. You did it. You provided the way. I want to ask you, what does it sound like in your life? What is the battle you're facing? Where do you need God to move? Are you relying on God or are you relying on yourself? And the question there is, have you relied on God or have you relied on yourself? Really, right? And then are you looking and waiting and trusting for God to move? It says there that, actually we'll read the last verse. The victory. It says, David did just as God had commanded, and they struck down the army of the Philistines from Gibeon even as far as Gezer. Then the fame of David went out into all the lands, and the Lord brought the fear of him on all nations. I want to tell you a couple things about this victory. It was so much better than the first victory. The first victory he wins, and they just run. But if you bring up the map, this victory, they run, you can see where Gibeon is. They chase the Philistines 10 miles over the mountains to Gezer. More than that. So they're just like, these guys are booking it. 10 miles of running and just slaying and taking out people, and it's done. But it says there that the fame of David went out into all the lands, and the Lord brought the fear of him on all the nations. That's not what David set out to do. David set out to give God the victory. And what we see is God exalts those who exalt him. Now, I want to be careful. Don't go exalting God so he can exalt you. Doesn't quite work that way. But I want to encourage you in this. May we be the Christians who, when we face a trial, our first instinct is to go to God and say, God, what do you want to do? How do you want to lead me? And may we be Christians that go to him even if the circumstances look just like they were. Even if the setting looks just like a past trial, even if we think we're like 99.9% sure. The thing about your faith right now is you're probably not asking God, can I go fill in the blank sin? When you first became a Christian, you're like, God, is it a sin to, do this? Whatever it was, whatever you're struggling. You've figured that stuff out. The questions you're asking God are more difficult. They need the Lord's leading. May we be the people that go to God and say, God, lead me in this. Bring me the victory. And may we go over and over and over again. And then when we get the victory, when we get the promotion, may we exalt God in that. Give him the victory, and then continue that pattern. The pattern of just trusting and relying on him and listening. God, are you telling me to do the same thing? Are you telling me to approach it the same way? How can I bring your name glory? How can I bring your name credit? If you do that, God is going to bless you. It might not mean that all the other nations around us fear your name, but it's going to be a blessing that you need and you want. It's going to be a great victory. But it all depends. How do we respond to the trial? So I'm going to wrap up there. I have a few more points. Band, if you can come up. If you want, I was going to end with like a challenge. Like, how do you know that the Lord's leading you? How do you know it's the Lord? And if you want those points, find me afterwards. Dave Hoffman has in his book, Prayer Will Change Your World, an 8-question test to see, is the thing that you think the Lord's leading you in, is it actually from the Lord? But for the sake of time, I'd rather just worship and press in. So will you guys stand up with me? Let's pray. Father, I pray that you would send your Spirit here. And God, I feel like in a message like this, there are so many different ways that you could be speaking to us, but I pray that you would give us ears to hear what we need to hear from you right now and strength to respond as we need to respond. In a room this big, God, you know there are so many different trials and questions that we are facing, situations where we need your leading. So I pray for my brothers and sisters, God, may you encourage them to respond in a way that will open their ears to what you want to say. If there are people here who need to repent because they've been just relying on you. Relying on themselves. God, we need to rely on you. Father, if we've been relying on ourselves, I pray that you would reveal it and help us to get prayer. If we've been taking the credit, Lord, may we lay those things down. Father, if there's a season of our life that we have painted incorrectly, that you can go back and you can reframe and show us how you moved and what victories you brought. Help us do that. But Lord, I want to walk in your victory. And I pray that for my brothers and sisters in this room. Help us to know the victory that you have for us. Lord, help us to rely on you. I want to encourage you guys, if you want to worship, to come forward and press in and fill this area. If you need prayer for anything, we're going to have ministry team below the screens. If you're new here, guys pray for guys, girls pray for girls, and you just walk up and you just say, I need prayer. They might ask you for a little bit more specifics, but you share what you're comfortable with. But in a community like this, and it's one of my favorite parts of this community, we pray for each other. We lift each other up like the Bible calls us to do. So if you need prayer, please don't hesitate. Please come down and talk to one of the ministry team members and get prayer. Otherwise, this front is open. I want to encourage you, let's fill it and give God the praise he deserves. All right, let's respond.